Max Verstappen claims a double victory after a 56-lap battle with Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. 2 drivers are disqualified for the first time in almost 20 years, and Logan Sargent is the recipient of his very first Formula One point as a result. This is Into the Chicane, the post-U.S. Grand Prix edition. We are your hosts. I'm Channing Apodaca.
I'm Brandon Wood.
And it is goddamn good to be here. The race was, it's what, 3 days old now, right?
Yeah, we're here on Wednesday. It's been a couple days.
Have you had enough time to digest?
Yeah, I had to go back and rewatch it. Of course, we did a race companion.
I haven't rewatched it since.
I did like the race in 30, so
okay.
Not a full rewatch, but it was definitely a fun one. Definitely feeling patriotic after this past weekend.
Yeah.
So.
Did you actually feel a little bit of a sense of pride for how good of a race it was?
The race, I will be honest, was not as exciting as I maybe had hoped it would be.
Oh, I thought it was
but
great.
Altogether, it was just a really cool weekend. I mean, you could see, there was some great racing. The weather was beautiful. I think altogether the vibes were very high. So I think it was a very successful US
It seemed like they did a much better event as compared to like last year. It felt...
well, you were actually there last year, so...
I was. I felt like I was only like partially there because I didn't get to like cover the entire grounds. And they're just like, at the areas that we were at, there just wasn't a whole lot going on. It didn't feel like any sort of... It didn't feel special at all. Like the most American thing about it was like there was some barbecue. But that's just... I guess that just feels kind of corny. Maybe that's all it is that I'm biased because what I see as being like a celebration of the country or whatever... just feels hack at this point, whereas, you go to another country and you get to celebrate the culture because you're not used to it. I don't know. But it seemed like it was better this year, which is cool for the people who were in attendance. And it was big numbers because not only was it Grand Prix weekend, it was a sprint race weekend.
Yeah, well, actually the promoters of the event said that they didn't actually see that much of an uptick compared to last year, considering it was a sprint weekend. So there's something to that.
Really? I saw a number that said that F1 weekends bring in almost $400 million to the city of Austin.
Just F1 weekends, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
that it's their biggest weekend of the year, like the city as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other big event that they have there every year, like South by Southwest. It's pretty big too, but, I don't know. It's hard to say. This kind of thing is obviously you get a lot more international travelers, people who are willing to spend a little bit more maybe, but because it is an international event. So
yeah.
But altogether it seemed like it was really cool. There was a lot of talk after this weekend about sprint races in general and whether or not they're actually any good. Most people seem to think that after this year's changes to the format, that it didn't really help and that people are kind of, at this point, over sprint races altogether.
It's so funny. I feel like I'm on such an opposite level of so many other people. Like last year I was saying that about sprint races, and now this year I love them. I've had so much fun watching every single sprint race as compared to last year. I was like, it's such a fucking waste. I don't want it to take away from the race itself, but I actually think the sprint shootout has worked. Or maybe I'm just biased because we've had so many wet weekends. And the sprints have been involved in that, and so it's just like this added element of chaos. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed it, and I think the sprint shootout has at least, it's shaken things up. It's caused a little bit of drama for a lot of drivers getting left out, a lot of drivers who you would think
some of the arguments against it are that, it's you very often... Outside of those weekends, like you said, that had weather that created abnormal circumstances, people feel like the sprint races very often give up what's going to actually happen on race day, right?
That's why I was kind of against it. That and the fact that, well, there's two ways to look at it. It's giving away what's going to happen, but the way the old sprint race format used to work was no drivers would ever go all out. They were only trying to not wreck.
Yeah.
But because you now have the shootout that determines the qualifying position for the sprint and the qualifying on Friday determining the race itself, they're two completely different races, essentially.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about losing your position on Saturday for Sunday's race, but I guess it is a little bit of a glimpse. It's like a teaser or a spoiler.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people would say if the goal of having a sprint weekend is to make the overall weekend more exciting, they would say that actually does the opposite, right? Because you got a short race on Saturday that kind of just dictates what's going to happen on Sunday. And then, when Sunday unfolds about the same that it does on Saturday, people are kind of like, okay, well,
that happened this time, but the last time around, the last sprint race we had, what was that? Spa?
Qatar, the weekend before this last one.
Oh shit, was it?
Yeah, which I think that is part of it too, right? It's like,
Oscar won the sprint race there, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't exactly like, this giant.
I know, that's why
there's more opportunity. I think that people have a recency bias for what happened because the way this shook out, the race almost ended exactly that way, aside from, the disqualifications that we're going to get into. But that's just the nature of this track, I think, because COTA is such a big track and it's a shortened race in general. It's not the 70 lapper that some other races are into the 60s. It's 56. So that's one of the shorter ones of the year. So you can just get a better idea of how it's going to shake out in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, recency bias, having these weekends back to back, people kind of, maybe don't like it as much. But I think in general, it's kind of cool to have a few of these throughout the year. Maybe 6 is a little too much. Let's
is
cut it back to like maybe 3.
Yeah.
Do some at the circuits that allow for it. Have a bigger pool like COTA, something like that. Maybe do one in.
Is it in Interlagos again this year?
I
don't remember.
I don't think. I think we might be done. There might be one more.
I think we are.
I got to look back at it, but instead of doing 6, maybe do 3, and then we just end at that. Have a few special weekends where maybe can earn some extra points, but in general, I don't think it's anything to get too upset about. Like people.
Yeah, I don't either. It's funny too, talking about recency bias. I think that's an issue with F1 altogether. When you think about it, like I've always been shocked because we always joke about the fact that we're the first to like predict something. Yeah. We've made that joke a couple times, and we have been early to the prediction and been like, see, it's fucking happening, yada, yada, or we'll predict something that becomes such a big rumor that it has to be shot down, which means it's like valid rumor, Mm-hmm. So many people don't like look into the future with F1. I think you and I see how things are like actually unfolding, and F1 news is so like, well, look at this, what happened. Oh, so that like shuts this down. That means that this isn't going to happen. Like after this race, Lance Stroll got what, 2, maybe 3 points? And people are like, see, Lance Stroll's back to form. No, not at all. Like it doesn't discount what's going on at that team. It doesn't discount the fact that I still think Lance Stroll's done, but there's been this giant uptake in like the Lance Stroll rumors and what's going to be happening. But because he got 1 point for the first time in 6 or 7 races, people go, oh, see, that's all kibosh.
Mm-hmm.
That's a waste. He's not going to go play tennis. He's not going to go back to school or whatever bullshit, or go race in Le Mans because he got 1 point.
Yeah, but it's evidence of such, but not foolproof, right?
No,
right? It doesn't. Completely
it's recency bias.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so COTA, we had, like you said, sprint weekend. So all the teams forced to go off of just the one practice session before jumping into the weekend. So that kind of is what many believe led to disqualifications that we eventually saw in the race.
That's another thing that that drivers don't like the sprint race because they get to do no technical changes in between the two.
Yeah.
They're putting more stress on their car, but they're not allowed to do any changes in between sessions. Right? I mean, without penalty.
Yeah.
I guess you would say.
Yeah. You just have the 1 hour of practice in order to get your
So you get
set up for the
less time to dial your car in, plus it's more stress on the car itself.
Is it more stress on the car?
If you're racing it as compared to just going through practice laps, I would assume.
Yeah, probably. I mean, racing though, like the sprint, it's only 12 laps, so it's not that much of a. I don't know. It's probably.
But it's 12 It's 12 flat out laps, pretty much.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see like the actual track time differences and that stuff, but
Plus, it's wheel-to-wheel racing as compared to just, finding a gap in practice and going for it to get your hot laps in. Yeah. I would assume, but I don't design these fucking cars, so I don't know. Also, I looked it up. There is one more sprint race left. It's Interlagos.
Yeah, so to start the weekend after our practice session, we have the qualifying session, and then track limits was another story again.
Reared its ugly little head. At least they're being consistent week after week at this point.
Yeah, but it's still when you see multiple drivers getting their times deleted. In this case, we saw Max, who put in a really great time to get pole.
Dude.
Had his lap deleted, ends up having to start on the grid from 6th place.
So let's talk about that lap. So down to the wire.
Yeah.
Because it was who? Chuck on provisional, right? Mm-hmm. With Lando behind. And Max puts in a yellow first sector, a green second sector, and a purple third sector that was so quick that it made up for the first two. Mm-hmm. I thought for sure he was going to maybe like third or fourth because that was such a piss poor lap, but was flying so hard in the third sector and then had to have it deleted by millimeters. And immediately, it didn't take them more than a minute and a half to go, oh, that's track limits, deleted.
Yeah.
Like the session, everybody hadn't even wrapped up before they deleted that one. But a flying lap. But yeah, made for more drama to delete that.
Yeah, many people saying that this makes a mockery of the sport. Seeing these types of things weekend after weekend.
Yeah, who was it? I want to say it was like Jensen Button or somebody. Oh, sorry, Joylan Palmer. Oh no, never mind. He was complaining about something else. Never mind, it wasn't track limits. It was passing off track.
Oh yeah, that was whatever. We can cover that later, but
kind of track limits though.
Yeah, definitely a track limits thing, but track limits, there's obviously a reason to have them, right? Like in some of the smaller or the junior divisions, I should say, they're not policed as hard. Obviously, that's for reasons that, because of the driver's limitations and stuff like that. But
right.
You're talking about Formula One drivers, you have to create some kind of limits that they have to stay within. And it's I understand most people would say, okay, well then make it a natural track limit, as in put gravel there or grass or something so that the drivers can't really go off.
What do you feel about sausage curbs?
Sausage curbs, from what I understand, they're extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
So they send cars up into the air, and so.
Well, that was like the answer to track limits for
a while.
For a while, yeah, it was the sausage curbs. So then you have cars almost getting airborne because of them.
Yeah, so it's since become just the white lines on either side, and you have to keep all 4 tires within those lines at all times, right? Mm-hmm. Some tracks where, like in COTA, I think it was turn 19 or whatever, where there's a big runoff of actual asphalt. It's not like gravel or anything where, if drivers could go wide and not really lose that much time, besides the fact they're going over the track limit. So you have to create some kind of safety standard, for people. You can't have it so that people are just straight up cutting corners, right? Like stuff like that, where it's just so egregious, but
Yeah, I think the only answer for now is that as long as the FIA and the stewards are consistent with the ruling of it, that's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
We're basically talking about a strike zone,
Yeah. And one of the complaints is that drivers don't often know that they've gone over those limits until like a lap later or something, where they get told that they went over or something. So maybe creating some type of system with a sensor that immediately lets the driver know when they've gone over and stuff like that.
That way they can just turn in another hot lap or something.
Exactly. It would make it a little easier, but the answer is not just getting rid of them, but maybe just advancing the technology.
That's probably for the best, because the big complaint from drivers is that they've gone over and then basically like not retired from the session, but they stop pushing and then run out of time, right? So they don't have time to continue pushing.
Or even just they don't realize, once they go for their next lap, if they don't know that on the lap before they went over track limits, or that they don't know how to
correct it.
Yeah, when they can't really see, there's nothing to indicate on feeling that they've gone over. So
just need an immediate feedback, I guess.
Yeah. So anyways, moving on. Sprint race was, like we said, it was a fun one. It was cool to see, the little battle at the beginning going into turn 1, but definitely ended the way that
we all expected.
Gave us a little preview for Sunday.
Yeah.
There was some notable things in the sprint. We saw George Russell passing Oscar Piastri off track, basically and
then crying, saying that he got shoved.
Well, yeah, he said that he got shoved, but so apparently Russell has brought this up in drivers' meetings before, complaining about this, where saying that people could take advantage of this in this kind of situation, much like the way he did, where he was stuck behind Oscar, is having trouble making a move. He just goes to pass off of the track, knowing that he's going to get a 5-second penalty. They make that judgment, say, hey, I'm going to lose more than 5 seconds staying behind Oscar, so I'm just going to make it pass off track and then just let it play itself out.
I think the team kind of went for that strategy too. Like, they just agreed, like, yeah, this is the best for this situation.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if he ended up getting the penalty or not.
He did.
But it didn't have an effect, right? He finished high enough.
He managed to
gap it.
Have enough of a gap ahead of Alex that he still got a point.
He was one of the guys who kind of got sold out in the sprint shootout. He didn't make it into the Q3 of the shootout.
Did he?
Yeah, he started P11.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of which, but on the subject of the sprint race and it being a spoiler, Max finished so far ahead. He finished 9 seconds ahead of Lewis. I was convinced that Max was going to finish by 20 or 30 seconds in the race. So not quite the spoiler that we thought that people are saying that it would be. The way it kind of shook out, podium-wise and finishing place-wise, I guess, the numbers were similar, but not in the timing of it. Things were actually a lot closer in the race than they were in the sprint.
Yeah, Max, starting from 6th in the race, was going to be facing a little bit more of a challenge to be able to get to the front, to get some clear air, to build that gap. Much like in the sprint, Charles, starting from 2nd.
Well, he started first in the race.
Started first in the race. He started 2nd in the sprint.
Yeah.
So much like in the sprint, Charles does not have a great start. Lando takes the lead going into turn 1.
It looked like he got a better start in the sprint than he did in the race. Lando in the race just kind of straight punked him. And Carlos kind of had to look up the inside and got completely just halted.
Well, in the sprint, he got pushed way wide by Max.
So
in a similar way, right?
But, he got a good enough start to Max had to push him all the way off, whereas, like, for Lando, it was a clean pass. It was just straight, and then it was all Lando from there on out.
Yeah, and so Lando kind of took it from there, had some clean air, got to lead the race for quite a while. Max...
30-some-odd laps, right?
Lap 29, I think, was when Max finally caught up to Lando and was able to make the pass. Some people on the internet, some Lewis Hamilton fans in particular, saying that Lando let Max by pretty easily compared to how he defended against Lewis later in the race. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's Max versus Lewis. Like, I mean, and it's 27 laps versus however many he had to defend against Lewis.
What do you mean?
It's like the Max pass is inevitable, and there's so much race to go on from there. Whereas when Lewis passes him, it's in the waning moments of the race. It's with, a handful or less laps.
They had 6 laps left.
Yeah, so of course you're going to defend a little bit harder because
100%.
You're out of options at that point.
100%.
Defense is all you've got. When you've got 27 laps remaining, when you're getting passed on lap 29, you've got some strategy to be played. And I did think Lando's the door that he left Max was a little soft.
Yeah, but he cut back right underneath.
He cut back.
In the next, and he was right there.
And then he was in his DRS. He was in his DRS for another 3 or 4 laps. And it looked to me like Max or like Lando was trying to save those hards to go a little bit longer. And then I thought their strategy was going to be make those hards last till about 46 or so. Just keep them in range. Don't let them get too much degradation on them. And then at 46, pit and go on softs, which I think could have won the race.
Yeah, 100%. His fight was not with Max. His fight was with Lewis.
Yeah, I think they could have contended if they had a little bit better of a strategy, but they were the first to flinch, and they went from hards to newer hards. Didn't love it. I was complaining about it a lot on the live stream, but
so
no surprise though that I love Lewis, but the Lewis stands and Team LH people need to fucking relax.
They need to chill a little bit.
I don't know why everybody thinks that it's Lewis versus everybody, and every single driver and every team and every person in the FIA and against is just pointing a gun at Lewis all times. So these people, it's getting old.
Yeah. But Lewis did have some amazing pace throughout the weekend.
Great.
Finished second in the sprint.
I think so. Yeah, he finished second.
Yeah, second in the sprint, and then, as we said, made a late charge for a while. With 6 laps to go, was able to pass Lando for second. Showing some really great pace. Mercedes, on the other hand, had a couple slow stops for Lewis and George. Lewis ended up pitting. He was complaining a little bit during the race.
They had like a 3.5 at one point, right?
Yeah,
like a 3.9.
Yeah, but 2 really bad stops, and then he pitted a little late compared to some of the other cars. Lewis felt like he was struggling a little bit, and so they kind of seemed like they wanted to make the one stop last a little bit longer than they really should have, and so kind of lost some time there. And then with Max's struggles with his brakes for a good portion of the race, but definitely very evident towards the end, the gap was closing up. Do you feel like Mercedes missed an opportunity here to get a win for Lewis?
Absolutely. He was 0.1 second faster than Max in the race. I don't know if it was like pace overall or if it was just pace towards the end of the race, but that's what the numbers that I read. And yeah, if they don't mess up those couple pit stops, if they get it within that 2 to 3 second window and not beyond that, that's an extra second right there. I don't know exactly how they would have gone about doing his tire strategy differently if it would have just been pitting him 1 lap earlier or with the
couple
pack.
Laps earlier.
Yeah, when they wanted to or when he wanted to. I don't know, but I think there was definitely a window to win that race, which sucks for Lewis. It would have been I would have really liked to see that.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the second year in a row that will have been the only 2 seasons he hasn't gotten a win.
Well, it's not over.
It's true.
It's not over. And Mercedes is still looking good. It is the second year in a row where him and Max went toe-to-toe at COTA.
Yeah.
Kind of backwards, though, because Max chased down Lewis in the final laps. In this race, Lewis was chasing down Max. I think Lewis gets it done with 1, maybe 2 laps.
Yeah. Which
is literally the window that he's complaining about. I have to say, while we're talking about, pit strategies and everything and Mercedes trying to big brain and outthink everybody, that's what Red Bull is so good at. Red Bull is so good at just making the call, not trying to look at, data after one team. Like let's take, so McLaren pitted Lando early, right? In the second half of the race. They were the first ones to, at least of the teams competing for a win and
sure.
Podium spots, they were the first ones to pit late. Red Bull responds right away, literally the next lap. The next time Max is going by the pit lane, he's in the pit lane, and they respond. Mercedes, Ferrari, they tend to try and analyze and outthink. Oh, no, we're just going to go on hards. Just respond.
Yeah.
Just respond. Just swing back.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing is a team like Ferrari, they know that they don't have the pace of the Red Bull, so they have to play it with a good strategy, right? So they have to, and most often they're going to have to run an opposite strategy from what Red Bull's doing, right? So
yeah, but I still think having a better response and just doing something, because they try and outthink them, and their strategy's not working anyways.
Yeah, well,
just follow.
Well, Ferrari's strategy was to do nothing, was to try to make the one stop work, and even as it became more and more evident that the one stop was not going to work for anybody, they decided to try to make it happen.
Yeah. Did you hear apparently Chuck and Pierre Gasly had a conversation before the race?
Yeah.
And it was so you guys, I forget who it was.
Charles is like, are you doing a one stop too? And Pierre's like, absolutely
fuck
not.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rough, you know.
Which is interesting to know that Charles would even bring that up to Pierre, giving away team strategy prior to the race.
I mean, that just shows you where he's at. He does not feel very confident.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Trouble in paradise.
You know, had Charles have had a better strategy, had Lewis have caught Max and actually passed him, unfortunately, it wouldn't have mattered because they both got disqualified after the race. Lewis finishing in second. Charles was in fifth or sixth, I think, before he got disqualified.
He was in sixth, I believe.
But there was 4 cars picked after the race. It was LeClerc,
Lewis,
Max, and who else? Who was the fourth? I don't remember who the fourth car was. It was I want to say it was a Haas, but I don't think so.
I know that it was those 3, that it was Max, Lewis, LeClerc, because I thought it was interesting that it was like 3 of the big names and 3 of the top finishers.
Yeah, well, I think that's usually when they're doing their checks, they try to make sure that they're checking the cars that were contending for the win. But anyways, 4 cars were randomly picked. Apparently that's how it's phrased. Those are randomly picked. 2 of them, both Charles and Lewis, had a plank height infraction. So the plank that goes on the bottom of the car, it's basically the structural thing that's the car is based around. It's the thing that skids and sparks when the cars are going around really fast around the corners.
It's one of the most rudimentary, I think would be the word.
Yeah.
It's the most like dull piece of equipment on an F1 car. It's a literal piece of wood.
Yeah, it's laminate, bunch of different layers together.
Yeah.
Piece of wood, like a skateboard kind of a thing. And, if that thing's too worn down at the end of the race, it's a safety concern and you get you immediately disqualified for the race.
So it's basically an indicator that the car's ride height is too low, right?
Essentially, right?
Yeah.
So with this being a sprint weekend, the team's only having the 1 hour of practice, which it kind of made it a little hard for teams to judge what that was going to be. Apparently Mercedes or Lewis's car had no wear whatsoever after the first practice, so they figured that would be cool. But as they get into the race, the speeds are a little higher. The car starts getting a little lower, starts grinding a little more. This is a very bumpy track.
That's what I'm saying about wear on the car in general. Through a sprint race weekend, you're not going to be reaching those speeds as consistently in 3 practice sessions or going hard over the curbs as you would in a sprint race when you're going all out.
Maybe, I mean, I'm not going to argue that the fact of this being a sprint weekend didn't lead to them making this mistake, but
I think without the sprint weekend, you got a little bit more wood on that board by the end of the race.
You're probably right. So definitely disappointing. A lot of people very upset by this, wondering why, if 50% of the cars that were checked,
why was one of them Lewis's?
Well, why weren't there more cars on the grid checked? Why?
That is a weird rule. Why 4? If you're gonna do your due diligence to just look at the wood and just inspect them all.
They're checking more things than that, right? They're weighing the cars. They're checking the fuel load, or like how much fuel is left in the car.
Yeah.
They're checking.
I know they have a lot of shit to
stuff,
check,
right?
but
so
it's one of those things that's frustrating. Like why those 4 only? And does them catching 2 of them and having to disqualify them now push the idea to go, all right, now we have to check the other 16 because 2 of them have infractions. Do we need to go check the other Mercedes? Do we need to go check the other Haas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Is that something they did? Who knows?
Well, it's not something they did because it's not part of it's just not what they do, right? Like they check the 4 cars that they, in the rules, say that they will check. And then if anybody that gets checked is disqualified, then they get disqualified. And then that's just how it is. If you didn't get checked, you lucked out, right?
That's silly.
But that's just the way the rules are written. If the FIA had more time to be able to check all the cars, I'm sure that they would. They could argue that maybe they should create some kind of better technologies to be able to check all the cars, some kind of laser scanning or something like that the cars can just pull
You're really assuming that the FIA has a lot of access to different types of lasers and sensors.
I mean, you would think that, like,
I would think so
you
too.
You would think that they can at least develop some of these things, and maybe
You would think so, but they're also just still using a piece of wood underneath the car. So maybe it's not as technologically advanced as we like to assume.
Yeah, well, I mean,
no, it is. It definitely is.
You know, with the way the rules are written, it does seemingly seem unfair, but it is seemingly unfair to the other teams that I don't know.
I think it's unfair to the drivers who got busted.
That's a better way to.
It's kind of unfair all around. Like I don't like. I mean, you ever been stopped for security at the airport?
Yeah.
And you get a random screening. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this very like, why me?
Yeah.
What the fuck? I have a fairly unique like my full name. You know, you don't see it too often. The one time I've been stopped by TSA for a random like screening stop and frisk, it was me and two Muslim guys. I was like, oh, this is pretty random.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not too random.
One of them was the director of photography for Jackass.
Yeah, so it sucks that people, especially someone like Lewis finishing second, got disqualified, but it's the way it is.
It sucks for a team like Mercedes who, their second driver, and he is the second driver, didn't have the greatest weekend. And then their number one driver, who has a fucking great weekend, contends for the race, almost wins it, gets a good amount of points in that race for a team that really is fighting for their final spot in the constructor standings. And Lewis, a driver who's fighting potentially for P2 in the driver standing, loses out on all those points.
Yeah.
And then people who use their Limitless chip to gather those two drivers in their fantasy also lose out on those points. That's where I take real issue with this.
Yeah, so with that disqualification, there was quite a big change up in the fantasy points for this week.
I mean, that was just a big shakeup. We can recap fantasy at the end of this, but oh boy.
So speaking of teams eking out every last point, we saw both AlphaTauris pit towards the end of the race for soft tires so that they can go and get the fastest lap. Both drivers outside of the points.
Yep.
At the time when they did this, I think it was Lewis who had the fastest lap.
Lewis did have the fastest lap. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was Lewis.
Because he held on to it for the majority of the end of the race.
So when this happened live, we both clocked it. We were like, oh,
that's a helmet move.
Oh, that's a total Helmut Marko Red Bull master plan move. Should that be allowed on the F1 grid? Should Red Bull be able to use the AlphaTauri drivers to their advantage?
As it stands now, yes. Because they are allowed to have that team, so they're going to get the perks of having that team. The real question is, should Red Bull be allowed to have that team? And should they have an overarching advisor that controls both and has a say in both, like Helmut Marko? Because he's got his voice on two different headsets, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. That should not be allowed if we're going to get mad at these things. And Red Bull's a team that I like. AlphaTauri is a team that I like. I like the entire Red Bull family. I like the way the system works. But is it fair? No. I don't know, though, if it was a complete Dr. Helmut move. Because if you go back and you look, Daniel Ricciardo was put on hards, and they tried to make that stint last very long. So they needed to do that pit anyways. They completely fucked up his race with that terrible pit strategy.
Yeah, I don't know if he had damage or what happened. But
I mean, he just wasn't running a good race. They ran him really long on those hards. It didn't work out. So they switched, and then you could just argue, why not throw him on the softs? I don't even know if that was all that they had left or not. But Yuki, I think, at that point was already in the points, so it made sense to put Yuki on the softs and go for fastest lap so that he can get the extra point.
Oh, yes. So Yuki was in the points, but he did have a gap because he had a pretty big gap to Alex. And then I saw that online that apparently
he was in 10th at that time, right?
Was he in 10th?
He would have been, because what did he finish? 8th?
Yeah, he finished 8th. So, but at that time,
he would have been in 10th.
He was running his race, and then when they told him to come in and pit, he was like, oh, crap, is something wrong with my car? Like, are they making me end my race? Like, he didn't understand that they were wanting him to come in to try and get the fastest lap. So when he first got the notification to come in, Yuki he thought that he, like, was done.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
funny,
I think it's a case of, they didn't have the greatest tire strategy for Daniel Ricciardo, and then can use it to their advantage for both teams to get him on soft tires, have him put in a fastest lap, take away the point from Lewis, and get the pit stop that they needed.
Right. Yeah. So
I mean, it ain't pretty, but
yeah,
neither
I
is
don't
the
like
world.
it. I think in a perfect world, AlphaTauri would be a Formula 2 team, and if they wanted to, make it more fair, make it so that teams can't own multiple teams, and leave it at that. Maybe
AlphaTauri should drop and let Andretti come in.
That's what I'm saying. I saw a thing today that apparently the FIA asked General Motors
If they wanted to join, but not without Andretti.
Yeah. So apparently
What a
there's
slap in the face.
I know there's personal beef between the teams and Andretti.
It's so funny though, because what could their beef be? Because Michael Andretti is running the team.
Yeah. I mean, Mario has said some questionable things in the past, and technically he was one of the people that started IndyCar, right?
I couldn't tell you.
And
I don't know.
IndyCar at the time was seen as a competitor for.
Yeah, but that dates back to the 50s.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Come on.
The shit doesn't make any sense to me.
They were the same car. They used to both run the Indy 500.
So maybe it's they want. It could be a thing where Renault's on its way out, and they're like, okay, well, if they don't want to start another team, but this manufacturer is trying to leave, maybe we can just replace them with GM and not actually start another team, Racing Point.
What I didn't read it. I just saw the headline of it. Typical me. But what was the actual conversation? Was it that they want them to run a team or just be an engine supplier?
Just be a supplier. Yeah.
Be a supplier, but not supply Andretti. Wow.
Or just if they would be willing to partner with anybody else, but. Anyways,
jeez.
So we had some predictions for COTA. We could run through those real quick. You had Daniel Ricciardo in the points.
Yeah.
He did not score any points.
No, he did not.
I had one of my predictions as Yuki beating him the entire weekend.
Daniel beat him in one session, didn't he?
Beat him in the sprint.
That's right.
So unfortunate, but it was kind of nice to see Yuki have such a good Sunday and DR struggle a little bit. Even though it's you hate to see somebody struggle, but
well, I mean, this to me was just kind of proof that in all the rumors that are going on with Daniel Ricciardo, and I get it's his first race back, so there's always going to be this big asterisk and this big question mark until they make the move. But I think it's a little bit of an answer to, or a little bit of a prelude to an answer that Daniel Ricciardo's not the answer to Red Bull's second seat problems.
Yeah.
It's got to be Sergio Perez, Yuki Tsunoda, or Liam Lawson if they want to stay in the family, or go and grab yourself somebody else.
Liam's looking pretty good right now.
I think Liam's looking fucking tasty. Or go out and get yourself that American boy. Get Colton Herta.
I think his time's passed.
I think so too.
Your second prediction was that McLaren would get a sprint win. A sprint win. Unfortunately,
No, they didn't look too great.
Yeah, both.
Well, Oscar was having himself quite a weekend.
Altogether, not great. Getting damaged, I think, in both the first laps. So.
This was his first time at COTA, and it really showed. Both races, it really showed.
Yeah. Altogether, could have been better for Oscar. Lando showed that their car did have some pretty good pace, but Oscar not able to really bring it home. You also had Logan dead last.
In the race?
In the race. So,
God.
Unfortunately for you,
the 1 week he chooses to.
Fortunately for Logan, he finished the race P12, but after the disqualifications, he manages to be the first American to score points in Formula One in 30 years.
Yeah. Wasn't it more than 30?
Probably.
I think it was, I forget. It's been a long time.
So good on you, Logan. I don't know that it's enough to really secure yourself for next year. There was a press release that went out that had language saying that we look forward to Logan's COTA 2024, but then they changed it after. So it's people were like, oh, they're leaking that
That he signed.
that he signed for next year, but then they changed it. So it could be that it was a mistake. They're not actually signing him, or they're just worried that people would find out. But so it's still up in the air. Logan's future is still unclear. So
Either way, congrats. That makes Daniel Ricciardo the only active driver without a point on the season.
yeah.
Because Nick DeVries obviously isn't going to get one.
Yeah, good for Logan. Get him out of that goose egg.
Thank God. Good for Williams too for putting him in a position to be there.
Yeah, so I had Carlos on the podium. He had a great run last year, but this year not as good for Carlos. He had a pretty decent little defense in the sprint and a nice little charge in the race. He ends up getting gifted with a third. He got a podium after Lewis's disqualification.
After the disqualification, I thought it was funny. Ferrari had to release a tweet after the disqualifications. Well, I guess it wouldn't have affected him, right? Because Chuck finished, what, P6?
Yeah.
And Carlos finished ahead of him, right? He finished P4.
Yeah.
Or P5. So it wouldn't have affected him, but it was funny to see Ferrari have to celebrate or kind of like fake celebrate Carlos's podium after the disqualifications were handed out. When it was like, all right,
rough, yeah.
One tweet was, hey, guess what? Sorry, guys, Charles Leclerc's been disqualified from this race. But kind of as a result, Carlos is P3.
Yeah, they just all go from celebrating on one side of the garage to the other.
Yeah.
So
it's just this. I mean, it like just the press releases that they have to do for it is like sad, happy. And they do them separately. So it's not like, this happened, so therefore this happened, and that's good. No, they're just completely separate.
Yeah.
Separate statements and everything.
So I had no Mercedes on the podium.
Oh, boy. You really lucked out.
Really lucked out on that one. But taking my total to another 2.
And I got 0?
I got 0, so 19-9. So
Jesus Christ, that's a mercy.
It's a mercy.
I don't know if I can even. I have to go. I have to basically go 3-0 from here on out.
It's possible.
It's possible.
Some Hail Marys.
I'm gonna have to be like, all right, max in the points. No, I think that's just about sewed up. And then we have fantasy to talk about, right?
Sure, if you want to. I know it's kind of a sore subject for you right now.
No, I don't even know when the last time we covered it was. I think we might have slipped up on the last few, so we gotta go through that. But big hit. I played a big chip, looking to take a big lead, and just stacked my team full of heavy hitters, and then 2 of them end up basically DNFing. So as it stands, I should have brought this up. As it stands, that bumped me down to 1 point behind Susie Wolfstand account, who she played her 3X trip, obviously put it on Max, and then put her 2X on Lando. So she walked away with 375. I walked away after playing my cost cap chip with 286, puts me down 1 point behind her. I do, however, still have my 3X in hand.
That's true. So
it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to come down to the nitty gritty. So Susie Wolfstand takes the lead. I bump down to 2nd. Porpoise Powertrains. That's you in 3rd. Strolling with my homies moves up to 4th. Let's Go Full Throttle drops down to 5th. Church of Checo's 6th. J Money in that vice loser spot as he's been all year. And then KJ bringing up the rear down by over 1,000 points. So pretty cool. Glad to have you.
So where do you think COTA ranks amongst the rest of the races for this year?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think that the pit strategies, there wasn't a whole lot of good or great on-track racing, wheel-to-wheel type shit. I mean, can you name any battles that were tight or fun? It was more like a little bit of a defense, a little bit of a comeback, couple overtakes, but they were obvious.
Yeah.
But I thought the excitement of what could happen made made it very exciting for me personally. The opening lap I loved. I could say, man, I'm starting to look at some of these other ones and like,
It's getting really
but again,
tough.
recency bias.
Yep.
Recency bias. I put it 7.
That's exactly where I was going to put it.
Okay.
So right after Austria, before Qatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
did really enjoy it though.
Yeah, it was good.
I'm looking at Australia and going, this thing's a real fucking outlier.
Well, like I said, we'll have to do a recap
Yeah.
episode where we really hash this out. But as of right now, I think 7th is a pretty good place for COTA. So we got Zandvoort, Netherlands is our number 1 for the season. Then Australia, number 3, Singapore, 4, Japan, 5, Monza, 6, Austria, 7, COTA, 8, Qatar, 9, Miami, 10, Jeddah. Then we got Britain, Canada, Hungary, Belgium, Bahrain, Azerbaijan, Spain, Italy, and Monaco at the very end, which
Didn't even happen.
didn't.
No, Monaco
Italy-
happened. Sorry, Italy didn't happen. I was looking at the thing while I was reading it. Monaco, just boring.
Yeah, so cool. I think that's it for COTA.
Yeah.
Any final words?
God bless America. God bless Logan Sargent.
And make sure to like and subscribe.
Well, now I just sound like a nationalist. I was going to throw something in that was going to be all-encompassing, but that's cool too. Make sure to like, subscribe, rate, review. What do you do? Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Or what is it? Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. Check out the With Koji. There is a tip jar. There's merch. There's alerts. We'll keep you posted for the next live.
Yeah, on YouTube, we got a couple videos we put out. You out there
yeah.
asking some questions to some people out in the street.
We didn't even go over that. If you haven't yet, check out the, we did a quizzing American sports fans on F1. We did 2 different parts on that. It was a lot of fun. Go check that out.
Cool. See you at the Mexico GP preview / F1 Academy finale review.
There we go. This has been the Into the Chicane U.S. Grand Prix post-race edition. Peace.
Peace.